Representative Victoria Spartz has been front and center in the conversation about the war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion. Tony Katz, great to be with you. She's been front and center about her support of Ukraine and thinking that the world should be supportive of Ukraine. She has also been written about with a piece on Politico. Republicans wince as their Ukrainian-born colleague thrashes Zelensky, clearly having issues with how things are going and how things are being presented. As the people at National Review wrote it and others have discussed it, Representative Spartz deserves an argument on Ukraine, the ability to engage the conversation. Is she somebody who is going about engaging Ukraine in a way that hurts America's interest or hurts America in terms of its support for Zelensky? Or is she having the honest conversation that more Americans need to have? Congresswoman Victoria Spartz, the 5th District of Indiana, joins us right now. Full disclosure, my member of Congress. It's Politico that started the conversation. Republicans wince as their Ukrainian-born colleague thrashes Zelensky. That's you. The question is, are your Republican colleagues wincing? And what is it you're saying about Zelensky that allegedly has people upset?
Well, thank you for having me. I kind of like it that all of the secret Republican, secret executive orders, they're so bold that everything is so secret, right? And unfortunately for Ukrainian people and unfortunately for American people, we have a very bad administration with very dishonest agenda. And I'm telling you, I said, at least if you have an agenda, be honest so we don't have people dying. And we have a lot of people dying here because of their failed agenda in Ukraine. And I'll tell you something, this is the same people that run this administration that gave Georgia to Russia. They gave Crimea to Russia, a big part of Georgia, Crimea, in eastern Ukraine. And I think they have a different agenda. I think they wanted Russia to have a big part of eastern Ukraine. I don't know if they're just anti-Ukrainian or pro-Russian. It doesn't matter. They're just afraid of everything. They don't want to deal with problems. But the problem is Ukrainian people do not want that, and Ukrainian army does not want that. So they're really sabotaging, from my perspective, and not helping that. And I said it's a dishonest.
Now, before you go on, Congresswoman, I want to make sure I understand. Which administration are you referring to? The Biden administration or the Zelensky administration?
No, I'm talking about Biden administration. This is administration that represents my country. This is administration that I have to be a check and balance to. So this administration, I'm talking Biden administration, and people that worked for him, that they were the one who gave Crimea, Georgia, eastern Ukraine, and they now want to give more because the way how they are delivering or not delivering and dragging their feet, what they're doing in Ukraine, I mean, this is unacceptable. They are not helping Ukraine to win, not help to hold Russia. They are actually almost like sabotaging what's happening there. And I'm saying I do not know if they're just afraid of Russia, China, because they're very pro-China, too. They do the talk, but they're helping China. They're giving money to UN that serves Russia and China, big money. Most of the money that you don't even think about it, that supposedly go to Ukraine, they go to United Nations that is full of Russian and Chinese spies. And it is a problem. And this is American money. And they don't want to be checked. They're pushing on Zelensky and Yermak. They're forcing them to do a lot of things that they believe needs to happen. And unfortunately, I don't know what their agenda, but in their track record, what's happened, it seems like they're willing to give territories to Russia, as many as possible. Maybe they're just anti-Ukraine or don't care or just don't want to deal with issues.
Is the argument, talking to Congresswoman Victoria Spartz of the Indiana 5th District, is the argument that the Biden administration is not doing enough to help the Ukrainians, or that the Biden administration doesn't care what happens to the Ukrainians? Because the issue has been, or I should say how people are describing it, is that you are not cheerleading Vladimir Zelensky, and that's considered to be a big issue for the party when supporting Zelensky was so important to everybody. Are you no longer supportive of Zelensky as the leader of Ukraine, or are you not supportive of ways the Biden administration has acted towards Zelensky?
Well, I think listen, for me not to decide, what Zelensky is doing to his country, but I know what we are doing. And I know what we're doing right now, since we're not managing the process. We're turning Ukraine in another Afghanistan. And this administration failed. It was a disaster what's happened in Afghanistan. And they're doing exactly the same thing, where we don't lead, we don't manage. They know there are so many problems that Ukraine has to deal with. There are so many interests inside Ukraine, so much infiltrations by Russians. There are so many other things. We could deal with it. We could have a better, more effective mechanism to help Ukraine better. But we are not doing that. We are not doing that. And it is very strange to me that it's exactly the same thing happening what happened in Afghanistan. It's very strange to me that this is the same people that gave big parts of Ukraine to Russia and Georgia. This is the same people that work under Obama administration. This is the same people that running the show right now in the Biden administration. But I say if their agenda is different and the strategies they have is not aligning with Ukrainian people, what people want, just be honest with them and just say, you know what, I'm going to be dragging my feet. I'm going to be, not helping you enough. Just be on your own and figure out if you're going to be dying there. Don't do the lies. Don't push on Zelensky and his people, to do all of this show, which is really not backed up by any actions, because it's unfair to these young kids and young people dying in the trenches. It's unfair to do that. Be honest with the people, because our talk and our work are not aligned. Our strategy, we don't even know what the strategy of this administration. So I think from my perspective, they're probably pushing on Zelensky to do what they want to do. But I would like to hear from them. What is their goal? Stop lying to American people. Stop lying to Congress. What are you doing? Don't do all this show on TV, because it's real people's life. It's not a show. It's not a theater.
So
and
I hear you.
Disappointed.
I hear you in a discussion of the Biden administration and whether or not they are truly supportive of Ukraine in trying to do away with this Russian threat. But as the reporting went and the conversations are happening, and you can say that the reporting is bunk, and I'm listening to you. You accuse Zelensky of playing politics, not understanding the seriousness of the conflict. Is Zelensky the right leader for the moment? And we are now 3 days past this Vogue cover shoot with him and the First Lady of Ukraine on the cover. Did that photo shoot hurt his credibility?
Well, I think, if you think about it, and most politicians, right, that go into, not necessarily, have the best, and knowledge how to do things, right? So if you think about it, he came from a different environment, right? He came from a different environment. He was involved in the theater. He's a young, and he's probably a person with some ambitions and all this stuff, right? But I think the challenge that you have when you get these young leaders, we could help these young leaders to govern better and help, but we are not. And we are spending a lot of resources and don't give a proper advice, don't give a proper oversight, make sure that they govern in the best way we can. We almost encourage them, to do things that are not really as productive for Ukraine. And this is a very strange to me, because we spend a lot of resources. Ukraine is in our strategic interest. Ukraine has a lot of critical resources that are very, very significant and would be very bad if China and Russia control them.
Is Vladimir Zelensky up to the task, in your view?
Any person, I don't know him well enough, right? Any person can step up to the task, and I think he did step up, at the beginning of the war, and were able to unite the West, and were able to do some things, right? So I think he stepped up to the occasion and was able to do something. But now there are different issues to deal with, and it could be maybe, our pressure that putting him in the wrong direction. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sitting with him. I'm not talking to him. So I don't know. I think a lot of actions, I would have done differently. But he is the leader of his country, and that's up to Ukrainian people. I am a congresswoman of this country, and I have a responsibility for my president to do his job. And I think he's not doing his job, and him not doing his job is going to hurt Ukraine and our national interest. And the problem I have, unfortunately, my establishment, but I think if you have a tabloid media and establishment attacking you, you're doing something right in D.C. I can tell you, if Politico's on your case, you're doing something right. And I'll tell you something. This is the people that write books, sit here, and they don't see real life. They all have academics. It's full of academics. They all discuss all of these things, but they never go on the ground and see real people. They don't see the suffering that's their policy do. They do not care. They live in this bubble, never get out in D.C., and they think like, oh, we're so great. What did they great to do for our country?
You're not going to get me to disagree with you, Congresswoman, about Politico. But before I let you go, talking to Congresswoman Victoria Spartz of the Indiana 5th District, part of the conversation is that you are Ukrainian-born. That is part of the reason you were able to get such a wide microphone. So I accept that you are in opposition to how the Biden administration is handling Ukraine. The story was about, do you oppose the way Zelensky is handling things? And while he's not your president, your voice still matters on it because that is how so much of your voice became prominent. So I wanted to make sure I was clear on that and getting an idea of whether or not the reporting of Politico is accurate, that you don't think that Zelensky is up to the task. Those are my words. And the question is, do you or do you not?
Well, I think, actually what they try to do, they try to undermine me everywhere here in Ukraine. But personally, I believe very likely that he is doing things under pressure from our administration. I think he gets enormous pressure, and people like Yermak that's controlled by Sullivan, because our administration has a different agenda. And that agenda is not aligned with agenda with American people, is not aligned with agenda with Ukrainian people or Ukrainian army. And I truly believe they exercising pressure on him to do things that actually I don't think good for that country. And I blame this administration because their reluctance to do some things and some things that I'm doing very puzzling for me. So I think Zelensky is under pressure and they're putting wrong pressure on him. That is my suspicion from what I see happening. I think he could be good for the country because I think as a human being, he cares about the people. But I think he's been pushed to do things that are not good for Ukrainian people. And it is unfortunate because a lot of them are dying right now and suffering. And a lot of these young boys are dying in the trenches because we send them on suicidal missions. But they're strong. I think they're going to prevail. And I think all of these people are surprised how well they can do, but they're just so strong and capable. And they did a lot of things against all of the odds, but they're still trying to push on them. I think it's just terrible for the government to do this to people. I honestly so frustrated with this administration, what they're doing. They had Americans killed in Afghanistan. They have a lot of people killed, and they're doing a lot of things right now. We just don't feel as much as pain because we have Ukrainians dying. But if this crisis escalates and we create Ukraine into Afghanistan, it's going to hurt all of us way more. And I don't know what's going on with our administration. That is my assumption, and so all they're trying to do is undermine me because they're trying to figure out how they can make their deals behind everyone's back. It's unfortunate, and I think Congress has a responsibility to step up for American people. And Congress has a duty. When you have a failed administration, you have a duty to step up for your country, and I don't see that. So they try to undermine me in Congress, too, because they know that my colleagues trust that I don't lie and I don't do something because I don't care about the people. I do always care only about the people.
Congresswoman Victoria Spartz, I appreciate you responding to me. I appreciate you taking the time to engage this. I think this is the first interview you've done since these stories broke. We're going to speak again. Thank you so very much. Congresswoman Victoria Spartz of the Indiana 5th District.